2022, and the world has changed. From the firestorms that we saw in California to those raging floods in Germany, climate change is definitely here, and with it this wake of destruction that no chart or report could have prepared us for. Yet despite the recent call to arms for emissions reductions, I personally feel that this situation is about to get way, way worse. Not by mid-century or in 20 years, but like today, now. Why? Because that small average temperature increase that we always hear about, that actually produces massively wild swings at the extremes. And it's at these extremes that the tipping points, they'll tip. Coral reefs will bleach, permafrost will melt, and just ecosystems will crumble. So, you and I, we're left to wonder, is that our new horizon? What if I told you it wasn't? What if in fact we were on the cusp of an entirely new era? An era that saw the mass deployment of a new kind of technology that restored our climate and our atmosphere basically forever. What if that was our horizon?
With sweltering temperatures and gale-force winds sweeping across the firegrounds.
This bay is a popular tourist destination, but the most intense blazes here have turned the skies a bright amber.
To know who I am and why I made this video, we have to go back to the summer of 2019, which was a year that no Australian, I don't think, will ever forget. At the time, I was working as the founder of a podcast startup when suddenly this chilling CNN broadcast came over the TV.
Firefighters in Australia are struggling to contain a massive fire burning out of control near Sydney now. Thick smoke from the flames has blanketed much of the city, turning the sky.
It was the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but covered in this thick blanket of smoke from the recent unprecedented fires. And in that very moment, I knew that the world had changed. Everyone that I loved, everything that I cherished, were in a way under attack, but not by a foreign power, but by Mother Earth herself. Even my cousin Elliot, an experienced firefighter in his own right, was shocked by the ferocity of the flames, pictured here in the truck in front. That year, 20% of Australian bushland would burn, killing billions of animals in the process. To what extent could we, for sure though, attribute that to climate change? Was it going to get worse, and at what trajectory? I decided to stop everything and learn. I read reports, books, met with people, and soaked in everything I could. And guess what? It was really, really bad. The situation was worse than I'd thought, because climate change deals in curved lines, not straight ones. Let me give you an example. At 1.5 degrees of warming, heat waves that usually occur once in every 10 years will occur every 2 to 3 years. And compound that with the fact that at the same warming, droughts will occur twice as often. What will this lead to? Well, fires that utterly eclipse and dwarf those of recent years. In turn, releasing more CO2 into the atmosphere, which is something that we call a feedback loop. But as I continued to read, there was a new thread that began to emerge. One of hope. And the more I read, the better I felt, until eventually I arrived at kind of an epiphany. There was a new way out, a horizon, a solution. Carbon markets were about to explode. And yes, though they would incur costs on those that excessively emitted carbon dioxide, they would also award profits to those who could successfully and verifiably remove it from the atmosphere. This blew my mind. Carbon removal. And if it hasn't blown yours yet, think of it this way. Imagine a gold rush of yesteryear, but instead of looking for gold in hard-to-reach places, you're looking for carbon dioxide, which is everywhere, all around us, all the time. And you may be thinking, okay, great. Well, all that's left is to fundamentally invent new ways of doing so, right? No, not at all. We actually know multiple ways of doing this. We just have absolutely no fucking clue how to scale it yet. So that's what this video is about. It's your 101 guide, or your on-ramp if you will, to everything that we know about carbon removal, or CDR for short. We'll walk through 6 of the most promising methods, touching on anything from land, capital, and energy requirements to counterfactuals. But we'll also keep a glaringly sober eye on the limitations of each method too. But before we get started, here's a super quick refresher on why warming occurs, why it's utterly imperative that we continue to decarbonize our planet in the meantime, and exactly how much we need to get out of the atmosphere. Let's jump in. To begin, meet Eric.
Well, hi guys. I'd like to show you a demonstration. Start with 2 clear soda bottles, develop some CO2 in the bottle, and now I'm going to turn a lamp on.
Eric is a college professor from South Florida State who can single-handedly demonstrate the incontrovertible truth of climate science. Essentially, gases like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, or even water vapor have properties that cause them to retain heat when in the atmosphere for longer.
My temperature change was 9 degrees Celsius, warmer in the bottle with the CO2.
Why are we so hell-bent on carbon dioxide then? Good question. Though it's not necessarily the most potent greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide is the most abundant and long-lasting, making it, on balance, the one we care about the most. It's so important, in fact, that we actually compare other greenhouse gases against it with terms like global warming potential and carbon dioxide equivalent. This year, though, methane has been getting a lot more attention, which is a really good sign. And how much CO2 do we need to remove from the atmosphere? Since 1850, humans have emitted 2,400 gigatons of the stuff, of which half has already been absorbed by natural processes in land, geological, and ocean sinks, something that we call the carbon cycle. The remaining unabsorbed half is our legacy, and it's our problem too. In fact, it has already resulted in an average temperature increase of 1.1 degrees Celsius. And that figure is going to be 1.5 degrees in 10 years from today, a full decade sooner than the IPCC initially estimated. And here's the kicker. Even if we do manage to radically reduce our emissions, and God, I hope we do, well then we'll still need to deploy 10 gigatons of CDR per year before 2050 if we want to keep any semblance of the life and comfort that we have today. So we know it's early days for carbon removal, but to find out exactly how early, I spoke with Sophie Purdom of Climate Tech VC, the leading newsletter on climate innovation.
So we've been writing Climate Tech VC for almost 2 years, and we cover the news and deals, of course, that happen in the space. In the first half of 2021, there was over $16 billion of venture capital funding deployed into climate technology. Carbon deals, so that's everything from carbon offsets to carbon removals to carbon marketplaces, only has 84 funds that have touched any of those deals. And it's a really small pool of folks willing to touch that. Ample opportunity, but you've got to buckle your seatbelt and be ready for a wild ride. It's definitely the frontier edge of climate tech.
Carbon dioxide removal is defined by the IPCC as any anthropogenic activity removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and durably storing it in geological, terrestrial, or ocean reservoirs, or in products. Though there are countless permutations of CDR, I prefer the following 6 categories: forests, BECCS or BiCRS, soil carbon sequestration, coastal blue carbon, direct air capture or DAC, and enhanced mineralization. Though the official term is carbon dioxide removal, it can freely be interchanged with carbon removal or carbon sequestration. But please do not confuse this with the term carbon capture and storage, which is a scam from the fossil fuel industry, where they simply reduce emissions that are already being emitted into the atmosphere. Don't worry, if it's a little confusing, even Elon got it wrong too, it would seem. So where else better to start than with, you guessed it, trees. The most obvious approach of the lot, afforestation and reforestation, are biological methods of CDR that utilizes photosynthesis, which is trees inhaling carbon dioxide to store carbon in wood and soil. The main thing worth stressing here is that it's overwhelmingly more effective to stop deforestation than to plant trees, well, where they once stood. That is because you avoid conversion and you don't have to wait for them to grow. Additionally, planting trees on previously cleared land can also increase the likelihood of deforestation elsewhere, as it actually increases competition for land in general. Current projections state that forests could uptake between 4 and 12 gigatons of CO2 per year at $20 to $100 a ton. And on trees, thank God for COP26, where world leaders finally agreed to end deforestation by 2030. Despite it being a monumental win for conservation, yes, tree trunks are looking like an increasingly precarious place to store carbon in an ever-combustible world. Bioenergy carbon capture and storage, or BECCS, is an engineered approach that has been typically used as a catch-all for CDR in global climate discussions. It is the process of growing or collecting biomass, things like trees or crops, which absorb CO2 from the atmosphere and then burning it through combustion to create, well, bioenergy. Critically though, the CO2 emitted from the process is captured before it's obviously released back into the atmosphere, and it is stored underground. Look, despite having a great deal of support, BECCS really confuses two separate goals. On one hand, energy production, and on the other, carbon removal. So instead, I am totally throwing in with a newer spin on the idea, BiCRS, or biomass carbon removal and storage, which has the exclusive goal of removing carbon. Cost and scale? Well, BiCRS ranges from $15 all the way up to $400 a ton of CO2. The wide range of biomass fuels and feedstocks means we could actually deploy it at 5 gigatons of CO2 per year. The problem? As BiCRS requires crops or trees as fuel, it could fiercely increase the competition for land. Lastly, BiCRS is particularly susceptible to something we call double accounting, which is claiming carbon credits for growing the trees, but then claiming the additional credits for burning them and storing the carbon, which doesn't make sense. As it turns out, modern farming practices alone are responsible for 17% of emissions, as they disturb the delicate balance between carbon inputs from roots and manure and microbial respiration. Soil sequestration is, therefore, any process that reverses this degradation by restoring it to its healthier self. This is done through sustainable practices like refraining from tilling, applying compost, or planting cover crops, which is just not leaving the soil bare between harvests. In terms of CO2 uptake, planting cover crops alone would yield annual rates of 2.2 tons of CO2 per hectare per year, whereas converting previously tilled land to pastures could almost double that. If we adopted this globally, we'd get to 3 to 5 gigatons of CO2 per year at around $50 a ton of CO2. Alright, so though soil is solid, recent studies, however, have shown that the durability of the carbon is questionable at best. That's because the carbon stores in soil are highly labile. Perhaps, though, we should take heed from FDR, who wrote, "The nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." Coastal blue carbon, or blue carbon, is another biological method that involves restoring coastal ecosystems like salt marshes, mangroves, and seagrass, which increases the amount of carbon stored in these habitats. To fully appreciate blue carbon, we need to really recognize that global wetlands alone have been reported to store 44% of the world's terrestrial biological carbon, and it's actually these same ecosystems that we're losing faster than any other ecosystem on the planet. But of these ecosystems, there is one that is particularly promising, and that is seaweed. I love seaweed. It can be inexpensively cultivated, as most of the inputs come from the surrounding ocean. And when it comes to storage, co-locating farms of these near deep ridges would allow for the easy dispensing of seaweed into the deep ocean for millennia. By far the most iconic CDR method capturing the attention from the public and media alike is direct air capture. Think big ass fans. Direct air capture systems can be subcategorized into two approaches, ones that utilize solids and ones that utilize liquids. In the former, air enters the system via a large array of fans and is then blown across contactors made of beads of silica, activated carbon, cellulose, alumina, or metal organic framework. Liquid systems, on the other hand, pass air through aqueous chemical solutions, which removes the CO2 while returning the rest of the air to the environment. Unlike many of the other CDR methods, DAC has massive energy requirements, meaning the design of a DAC plant must also effectively include the design of an energy plant coupled to it. DAC alone is not a complete CDR system as well, because again, it needs to be paired with storage, which we'll come to later. In my opinion, the most promising CDR method of the lot is enhanced mineralization. Now, this is an umbrella term for a bunch of chemical processes where atmospheric or aqueous CO2 reacts with alkaline minerals such as limestone, olivine, serpentine, and wolstenite. That forms carbonate solids like calcite or magnesite. Though this process occurs naturally, playing an essential role in balancing CO2 over the ages, it is incredibly slow. In the context of CDR, enhanced mineralization therefore refers to engineering its acceleration and scale. Yes, at first, mineralization can certainly be complicated. It has a multitude of different mechanisms and different applications. We could, for example, purpose mine these minerals from peridotites or get them from industrial slag. We could crush them to encourage ambient weathering, or we could add them to soil. But what we do know is that the sky is the limit when it comes to the natural sources of these minerals, as we could store up to 10 gigatons of CO2 per year, between $20 and $100 a ton. One company doing something amazing in this space is Heirloom Carbon Technologies, whose founder Shashank believes that they can remove carbon at $50 a ton.
So what we do is we create this looping process where we start with these naturally available carbon and minerals, these rocks I talked about. And the first thing we do is we put them in an electric calciner, where we can drive this by renewable energy. Thermally decomposes the carbonates, which have the CO2 already in them, and splits them out of the oxides. And the CO2, you put it underground for thousands of years. The other thing that it gets is these oxides. This oxide coming out is very thirsty for CO2. Our process is all about exposing these oxides to as much atmosphere so it can touch a lot of these CO2 molecules.
Another reason enhanced mineralization is so dope is ocean alkalinity enhancement, which is the process of depositing these minerals in the oceans. And the results, well, in theory, we could store trillions of tons of CO2 in our oceans. And in practice, though, it would be greatly limited by extracting, grinding down, and deployment of these minerals. So there you have it. By just tweaking our economy and aligning our financial incentives, we could absolutely usher in a new age of prosperity and ecological good, of both renewable energy and CDR jobs in the millions. But please keep in mind, our collective emissions must come down as fast as humanly possible too. In fact, I actually urge you to be wary of any political leader who hides by carbon removal as a thinly veiled excuse for inaction on emissions reductions. But what can you do? Well, as always, I implore you to vote for those who get it over those who don't. Furthermore, the carbon removal industry is currently exploding. So for a list of carbon removal specific jobs, check out climatebase.org. And if you're looking to get your first taste of carbon removal in action, head over to my friends at nori.com, who can verifiably remove CO2 with soil sequestration, or head to Climeworks for DAC. Also, if you're a scientist, engineer, or investor interested in the space and you want to meet more people, head over to airminers.com to join the world's biggest CDR community, full of great events, opportunities, and great ideas. So that is it from me. If you want more videos like these, like and subscribe to this channel where you can follow me as I work to uncover a fantastic future for carbon removal, our new horizon.